welcome back to the Shizen Hogo-Ku Zoo here on Planet Zoo in our franchise mode. Today we're going to do a few different things, but before we really get into our saltwater crocodile habitat speed build, we're going to talk about this building right here. So as I've been mentioning in the past few episodes, we've been having issues with our Chinese pangolins getting stressed. So therefore I did a little bit of an edit here. I didn't complete it and I'll explain why. And just to start off with things, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new information area over here. So we don't have just that one information kiosk, which is getting really busy. And we're going to give this zoo 2 now toward the front, and that's where we're going to have it for at least 4 now. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to take out this room right here that you see that I'm taking out. And we're taking it out because, first of all, Chinese pangolins, they're getting stressed. So I wanted to limit the viewing area for our people, which is exactly what we did. And I also shortened the building a little. So that's that. That's the easiest way to explain it. And we just kind of give it a small renovation. It's nothing too big. But we kind of make it so they also have a little bit more space too, and we just try to make it seem a little bit more spacious for our Chinese pangolins and not so restricted. And that also goes for the aesthetic feel of this habitat. I did consider expanding the area closer toward the pathway, but it would block the view for the guests, and essentially they probably wouldn't get any view at all, depending on how often the Chinese pangolins were to hide. So we did a little bit of that, and we really just added in some more foliage, some of more just visual barriers for this habitat. It was more of just for simplicity and making sure that our area just works out a little bit better. I also make it so that things just kind of blend in a little bit more, add a few more rocks, a few more trees, so these guys have a little bit more hiding space, which is what I wanted. Let's move on to our project. So that was just a small update about our overall park and a little bit more of the renovation side of things to where we're improving certain parts of our park. However, the speed builds is where it's at. So we're actually going to do something over here for our saltwater crocodiles, which I really haven't done in another habitat, and that's basically just building a small bridge right over a pond where our saltwater crocodiles can freely roam. So this was actually a very interesting habitat, and as you can see, I have 2 sections of this building made, or sorry, this area made, and there's a part of the lake on one side and there's part of the lake on the other. And it's all one, really, and we just make a man-made bridge, which doesn't really make it flow in between each other. So we're just going to pretend like there's a gutter underneath that kind of evenly distributes the water. However, moving on from that part, we do have a little bit of a structure down to where we know what we want to do. But as you see where that barrier is, that's the only side that we're going to be using for this speed build. The other side is a possible addition. So I'm thinking that we add in 2 areas, because I saw that our saltwater crocodiles don't care for a whole lot of room, but at the same time you can't have any more than like 1 male, 1 female in a group at a time. So it was a little bit interesting to see that, especially since I'm pretty sure I've seen saltwater crocodiles just like a bunch pummeled into one space before. But for the sake of simplicity and for the sake of making sure that they don't fight with each other, we're going to make 2 habitats. Although we're only going to get 1 done this episode. So it's almost like our red panda habitat situation. We're going to do the same for that as we are doing here. Just a small little update on the red pandas, by the way. They are living their comfortable lives and they've been doing very well. And we're going to finish the other section of the habitat. I'm probably going to do it off screen. I already have half of it done. Just haven't really finished it, that's all. Anyhow, back to our saltwater crocodiles. So as you can see here, we build a basic bridge. It's more of like an old structure type to a bridge, so it's like stone that's built up, and then we have our wood that kind of helps support the structure a little bit. It wasn't very detailed, but it also wasn't like super minimalistic. So we end up putting in some nice little structure beams to make it look a little bit more real and a little bit more structured, so it fit into the theme of our park a little bit more, and a little bit more towards realism aspect of the park. I did have a little structure triangle thing that we just kind of extended underneath and attached to each pole. So that's what I kind of did. We kind of use this to our advantage later by adding some lights to it and actually doing some interesting things with our educational boards and other facilities. So we'll get to that later. But other than that, the wood does stick out a little bit to the sides, and I didn't want that to happen, but I actually said, actually that's not a bad idea, because if you do look at some old-fashioned, or should I say some older building styles, you do see wood going straight through wood, because that's how things were just put together. You didn't use nails, you didn't use little steel wedges and stuff like this that attach one piece of wood to another. You just stuck wood through other wood. That's kind of how it worked. Anyhow, moving on. We do have this back space over here, which I want to use, and I think I mentioned this earlier, that I wanted to kind of have another like little staff headquarters back here, or some sort of area for our staff to come over. Now we do add in a large keeper's hut. Now this keeper's hut can be used for the 2 habitats for our red pandas, for the habitat of our saltwater crocodile, including the habitat for the gharial habitat. So that means that we can have 4 people in here at once that are making food for our other habitats. Now another thing that I have to consider too is that we have 4 habitats that kind of fit into one building. You don't need 4 people in here at a time, so it's probably never going to be filled. However, we can look into maybe doing something to where we can actually sneak a path somewhere to get to another habitat. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's gonna be a thought process if I try to do something crazy. And we do have that one small little keeper's hut over toward our gharial habitat. I'm probably gonna remove that, and I'm probably gonna also explain that later why, because this is such a large area back here, and I'm gonna try to open things up in a interesting way. I'll talk about that soon. I'm not going to waste too much time on it. We do carry on a similar theme over from our gharials, and we do keep that wall, and we just kind of extend it over. We don't use a super cool barrier or anything like that. It's just the route that we took. No big deal. We just use that simple metal barrier and nothing else. There's really no need for anything else right now. So we just use that as a backdrop more than anything, and then we're going to try to use some foliage to cover it over, just since that's the simple way of doing things. I could extend that wall, but I want to try to figure out something different. I'm not quite sure what that is yet, but nonetheless, we want to move on, and we want to make sure that we kind of have some sort of overall idea for this habitat before we start getting into small little details. So as in for our utilities, we did move our transformer and our water purifier toward the back so it works out a little bit better. As in for the look and design of things, we could have left it closer to the bridge like we did have it before I even made the bridge. So it was a little bit more off to the side. It was more in the pathway area when I built the gharial habitat along with our red panda habitat. So we ended up moving that. But as you can see here, we are building up this space pretty well. So we do have a little side area that we have that we can use for maybe a garden or some sort of special area. Let me know in the comments down below what you think I can do with that area. I'm thinking that we could do an exhibit area right over there or something similar to that. Make a garden, or maybe even do something else. I'm not quite sure what that would be yet, but let me know if you have any ideas. Then we just have to learn how to flush the area for our pathways and our barriers, because there's just a lot of barrier and not enough null barrier to where you have that little bit of area that kind of just doesn't work out because you can't put the barrier right on the pathway. So we do end up putting in some little wood posts, and it does a very good job blending in. Actually, I kind of liked how that worked. So it makes it look not perfect, but at the same time it gives it a little bit of a different look that you just kind of don't notice. So not everything's reoccurring and not everything's the same. That's kind of what we want to avoid, because that's how it kind of works in a zoo. You want to feel like you're actually in the zoo, and things are functional in the zoo. You have to have some sort of functionality, but you also want to have that theme to it. But you don't want to have, an overwhelmingly amount of theme to where there's no functionality. But then we bring in our saltwater crocodiles, and I'm excited for these guys because they have a beautiful area. It works out really well, aside from maybe the backsplash with the barrier, but anyhow, I digress from that. First thing that I wanted to do is make sure we added their food stations along with their enrichment items. I thought that would work best because I usually just forget about them, number one, and it just doesn't work out well when you forget about it and then you can't work it in properly. But we bring in some rocks to kind of make it seem like these guys live in a more rocky area. They are definitely fine with living in a more rocky area. That's kind of how it works for them. I didn't really read up on them. I kind of forgot that I should probably figure out how to put some conservation boards into this area, and as a matter of fact, I didn't put any in, so I don't know what they have issues with. I want to be a little bit educational, but sometimes your boy does forget. But we do bring in these rocks, and we make a nice little coastline type feel and a little beachy feel. So they do have like a side beach entrance. It almost looks like something that you would find in like a weird water park, or like a weird like little river where you have all these rocks and then all of a sudden it kind of just drops off into the water and there's sand, and it kind of gives it that cool look. And they are saltwater, so they do have nice water over here, and we just have to kind of visualize that a little bit, so they live in more of the saltwater river areas and coastlines. Then we bring in the foliage. Foliage looks great. I mix in a bunch of different stuff. I don't want it to look as garden-like as some other areas that I usually mess around with. So we kind of give it a little bit of organization, but make it messy in some areas, because you need to make it messy in some areas for it to feel like a zoo. That's just how it works. So we put in some nice color flowers by our little building there, which we will edit after, and throw in some nice bushes in some areas so we can kind of avoid that eye contact with the metal barrier. And moving on, we have to start talking about our wonderful guest facilities, such as signs that say do not feed the animals, because what kind of animals would you want to feed most? Probably alligators, crocodiles, and reptiles. So we want to make sure we avoid that, and we put up some do not feed signs. I haven't really had any issues with people trying to feed animals in this game. I don't know if it's still a thing, or if I just have really like nice people and people that know not to feed animals. So anyhow, we do put up some educational boards, and we just put them right on the posts. We end up throwing up some speakers into the little rafters or the little support beams by the roof, and we have it so it speaks down toward our guests. Works out very good. Regardless, if you are wanting to walk from the gharial habitat over to the heart of our zoo, which is that lake now with the big building in the middle, you will have to walk through this area where the saltwater crocodiles are. So regardless, people have to walk through this area. Now, it is a thing where I don't like having a congested area, but sometimes I do risk it, and I end up just throwing in a spot where, you know, there's no side path to go see the animals. So I do that sometimes, and we'll see if it's gonna bite me in the butt later. Now moving on to our staff facilities, we do end up customizing this building a little bit more. It's not perfect, and it certainly is a little bit of a weird design considering changing the design of it, but we do use a plaster wall, a barrier, like little stone barrier toward the front that kind of pops out the building a little bit, and then we try to make it a little bit modern looking in a weird way, that where it kind of fits the theme but it fits the functionality. But then we go back to the bridge, and then we end up putting up some lanterns, which looks really nice on the bridge. It's amazing what happens when you just add something that pops out a little bit like lanterns. It works out great. And then behind the scenes, we want to add in some nice lights for our staff so they can see where they're going. We also make sure that we do add in some other neat things, such as vehicles. I do have this big vehicle that I got off the Steam Workshop, and it's almost like a septic tank or like some sort of water filtration tank or something like that. And we ended up adding it in over here. The only thing that we have to consider is that it cannot enter and exit out of the little staff entrance that we have for our small gharial habitat entrance. So where that little keeper's hut is. So I want to try to fix that area up a little bit and maybe do something different with that to kind of fit the theme a little bit more. I think that would be interesting. And just like most of these areas, we add in some pavement so that it's a big open area for our staff to walk around and to make sure that our vehicles can drive freely as if they could actually drive. So we end up just doing a little bit of that, and everything gets fixed up quite nicely. We don't finish it, obviously. There's a lot of room back here to expand upon. And I also want to fill in that plot of land right next to our new habitat, in between our saltwater crocodiles and our red pandas. Leave me a comment down below on what you think we should do with that area. Any other comments or suggestions would also be appreciated. Other than that, please subscribe and like this video, and I shall see you guys in the next video. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.